A new week starts right here, right now, live on a Monday on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. That includes sportsgrid.com/watch, where you can find your favorite destination to consume everything all across the grid. Look who is back. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. We are here together for the next 3 hours up until 11 a.m. Eastern Time. DRS is back from the Big Easy, where our final football game of the 2024 NFL season on February 9th, 2025, came to a close inside the Caesars Superdome, Super Bowl 59. And for the second time in the last decade, the Philadelphia Eagles are a Super Bowl champion, which means Donnie Rightside, in the set that you see behind him, has to add a second Lombardi Trophy replica to what we will see. There is the first. There will be a second. Donnie Rightside, we are glad to have you back. Glad to have your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions to everything we saw on Super Bowl Sunday in New Orleans. We will dive through it all over these next 3 hours right here on the early line.
Feels good to be back in town at this point. Started seeing some TEL commercials pop up where I wasn't featured on them. Wonder if I was getting phased out behind the scenes. But we had a great week in New Orleans and plenty of time to go over that. But yesterday, the culmination of one of the best seasons I've ever seen, and I could not believe my eyes. Now, we'll get into it, and I said from the last Super Bowl, the footing was bad. The Eagles got robbed. The footing would be good in this one. But even me, the most ardent fan, hoping that the Eagles would pummel the Kansas City Chiefs, I think much like myself and the rest of the country was watching in amazement where the Kansas City Chiefs look absolutely pedestrian because of how good the Philadelphia Eagles were. We got a lot to get to. I don't know if my voice is going to hold out for 3 hours, but I'm glad to be here on a Victory Monday morning.
That I do not doubt, DRS. Down in the basement yesterday, taking in all that we saw in the big game. So let's not bury the lead and get right into our Super Bowl 59 recap and reaction for the final Monday to sit back in an armchair and play Monday morning armchair quarterback around the National Football League for the biggest game of each and every NFL campaign. Last night, Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans for the second time in a 3-year window. The Chiefs and the Eagles. Philadelphia trying to exact some revenge. Kansas City trying to make history to become the first 3-peat champion in the history of the National Football League as it pertains to the Super Bowl era. But Philadelphia stands in the way of that historic and dynastic run, and not ever so slightly, but in a dominant manner. Perhaps one of the most dominant performances we have ever seen in a Super Bowl. And last night was our 59th. Philadelphia wins 40-22 outright as a 1.5 underdog, closing number, even money on that money line, and a total of 48.5 does sky over. Donnie, nearly a 20-point victory for your Birds last night. 18 would be that decided outcome. But let's just call a spade a spade. It wasn't even nearly that close for the entirety of our 60 minutes last night inside the Big Easy. As you were sitting there and watching Super Bowl 59 play out, what were some of your initial reactions?
Initial reactions were how much the Eagles were locked in, Ben, over the past couple weeks. And the one thing that I always liked about Jalen Hurts is he's even keel. But every time you asked him a question after each playoff win, doesn't matter. The only one is the Super Bowl. Learned a lot from our time losing to the Chiefs 2 years ago. The mission is not accomplished. And you saw that last week. And getting some of the looks from the beat writers that we were talking to, the Eagles felt confident, like they were the heavyweight champion, where they weren't just happy to be in the Super Bowl. They expected to have a dominant performance, and a dominant performance they did. And also, just trusting what you know. 2 years ago, I bet the Philadelphia Eagles to win the Super Bowl. Let's just say I picked the Philadelphia Eagles to win the Super Bowl. They were the better team, didn't win that game. They were up double digits. Last year, the 49ers, the better football team, I picked them to win the Super Bowl. They lost up double digits, weren't able to seal the deal. Now, this one, the Eagles knew better, getting up double digits, understanding they blew this lead 2 years ago. They weren't going to make that mistake again. And it's amazing to see one first down out of the Kansas City Chiefs for all intents and purposes in that first half, which came on the first play of the game to Juju Smith-Schuster. They were absolutely lights out. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as the show goes on. The fact that the Eagles didn't blitz one time and absolutely collapse the pocket, play by play by play, what a sensational performance by Vic Fangio in that defense.
It really was. Jalen Hurts was your Super Bowl 59 MVP, and we'll get into why in just a moment. But you could have handed out MVP hardware across the entirety of the defensive front or into that defensive booth. And Vic Fangio, nearly in the league for 4 decades as an assistant of some sort or fashion, in his first year as the defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, a first-time Super Bowl champion on full display last night in New Orleans. The Eagles constantly pressuring Patrick Mahomes, but never fully blitzing him or bringing the house, sacking Mahomes 6 times, forcing 2 interceptions out of Mahomes, including one in the opening half, brought back by not a safety, but Cooper DeJean, that quarterback, the 22-year-old rookie, celebrating his 22nd birthday on Super Bowl Sunday, his first career NFL INT that, of course, he takes back for a house call. And, Donnie, to me, that was my main takeaway and reaction from yesterday. This was the 7th year for Patrick Mahomes as the starting quarterback in KC, the 5th Super Bowl appearance in the last 6 seasons, hoping to make history, already notching some history as a back-to-back Lombardi Trophy winner and even playing in a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl. And you've said it for the good majority of the last 2 NFL seasons. How can you doubt Patrick Mahomes? How can you doubt Andy Reid? In these spots, even not playing their best football, they always pull something off, even if it's a razor-thin edge, and come through in the most significant moments. Last night, it was the opposite of that. They never pulled through, despite the fact we were giving them, correctly so, the benefit of the doubt. Down 10-0, down 17-0. Just wait, the Chiefs are still in a position to strike. They never did, Donnie. And they weren't particularly close. In fact, to me, the story of the game was how lost Kansas City was offensively for really the opening 3 quarters of that matchup. Shut out until the final 34 seconds of the 3rd quarter.
It was absolutely amazing. And also understand this. What's the pathway to victory? The Eagles are going to control the game on the ground. Saquon Barkley ran for 2.3 yards per carry. And the Eagles at one point in that game were up 40-6, which, again, the spotlight on Jalen Hurts was fantastic. We'll spend a lot of time talking about him. But it is Vic Fangio's defense that got after it. Understand this. They were the worst defense in football last year. Yeah. You know who they added? 2 rookies in the draft, and Zach Bond, a cast-off special team part-time football player, and returned to dominance as the best team. Because why? Vic Fangio was that defensive genius. Hey, he's never beat the Kansas City Chiefs. He's terrible against Patrick Mahomes. We understand the task at hand. You gave him 2 weeks to get prepared for that Kansas City offense. He was absolutely one of those shining bright moments last night, and it's good to see a guy who's worked his entire career, known as a defensive genius, to finally put the ring on his finger. I can't say enough about what it means to have Vic Fangio in Philadelphia from a worst defense to a first defense in one season. That's incredible.
It's a great way, DRS, to surmise all of it, to encapsulate the difference for the Birds this year. Because let's not forget, for the 2nd time in 3 years, we saw the same Super Bowl matchup between Kansas City and Philadelphia. The story back in Glendale, Arizona for Super Bowl 57 was the Chiefs coming through when it mattered most. For Patrick Mahomes, booked as an underdog in that spot, doing what he has constantly done throughout his postseason resume. Donnie, entering yesterday, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, perfect 8-0 straight up and against the number as a field goal favorite or fewer or an underdog. The first loss, the first non-cover at the hands of Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. So let's highlight that Eagles offense in the quarterback Jalen Hurts, who is a Super Bowl champion now and forever. More on the early line next.
Patino himself, in a clip that we just played, said basically the stats are not backing up the team's wins.
St. John's is offensive blast. That's where a lot of opportunities for St. John's came from. St. John's does not shoot the basketball well. It might even be fair to say they shoot it poorly. They were 3 of 16 from deep last night. But it doesn't seem to matter to them.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
In a short format tournament like this, like the Olympics, now this is even smaller, only 4 teams, who's got the best goaltending? You're talking 3 round robin games and then a knockout with 4 teams. So you're playing 5 games.
I'm not sold yet, Mike, on the USA stuff, on the merch, but I think I'm sold on the USA at least being in the final.
Only on SportsGrid.
The Philadelphia Eagles, for the second time in franchise history, a Super Bowl champion at the pinnacle of the National Football League. And Donnie, it has well been reported that Jalen Hurts' phone background since coming up ever so shy of Kansas City 2 seasons ago in Phoenix, Arizona, had himself watching the red and yellow confetti fall out there in the desert. Jalen Hurts waiting for his moment to be back in this spot despite outperforming Patrick Mahomes, perhaps, in the first time these two sides met. Jalen Hurts, a man that shows little emotion, always very even-keeled, which is what you want out of your signal caller if you are hoping to win a Super Bowl championship. Jalen Hurts, who famously has said, DRS, you either win or you learn. Well, he learned last night, and he looked one step ahead of KC's defense for all 60 minutes inside the Caesars Superdome. I say 60 minutes. He didn't even play the final 5. Kenny Pickett got some run. The game was so out of hand. Look at those numbers. For a second consecutive Super Bowl matchup, Jalen Hurts was the better quarterback out there last night, even in front of Patrick Mahomes. 17 of 22 through the air. 222 passing yards over his number of 211 and a hook. And for the second consecutive Super Bowl as well, Hurts, Philadelphia's leading rusher. 11 carries for 72 yards on the ground. One of the main stories, Donnie, how healthy, how effective would that left knee be for Jalen Hurts last night? The answer was very. 3 total touchdowns, and as Hurts leads Philadelphia to a Super Bowl 59 championship, he goes home with some MVP hardware as well.
Like Michael Jackson said, boy, that is a smooth criminal out here. You might see him in front of that microphone look like he's disinterested, but boy, his words are poignant, and what he says, he meant it here. And how about that? Having your phone, which again, not a lot of fanfare. Somebody actually got a picture of him trying to unlock his phone with the picture of him sitting on the sidelines there, walking off, I should say, the Super Bowl with all the confetti coming down in a losing fashion. What a way to motivate yourself, and understand this as well. Like, if you look at Jalen Hurts, he's still a young quarterback in the league and now has a Super Bowl and an MVP. But all throughout the season, whether it's national headlines, local beat writers, people just saying, he's not a good quarterback. He's just a game manager. He can't get the job done. Now outplaying, I should say, Patrick Mahomes in the only 2 Super Bowls that he's been in versus Patrick Mahomes is a sensational way to go out here. And his job isn't done. He's going to probably be a high-level quarterback for a decade. But understand, in any business that you're in, like, let's just say you're a superstar on a great sitcom show, but you're one of the people on the show that doesn't get any credit because they say the other cast members are so much better than you and you're riding their coattails. Taking that to heart and coming up with performances like this, because even once you got to the playoffs, yeah, they beat the Green Bay Packers, a good football team, wasn't celebrating. Yeah. Yes, they beat the Los Angeles Rams. Job not done. We got a playoff victory. So what? Winning the NFC Championship game by 30 points at home, it's not a big deal. The next one is the one we want. And even being in New Orleans, where you saw all of those press conferences come out, just being calm, cool, collected, and saying, hey, how's it feel to be in the Super Bowl? It's only going to feel good if we win this thing. And damn it, did he win that thing, Ben.
Jalen Hurts scoring the opening touchdown of Super Bowl 59, minus 115 to hit pay dirt, the second best price of any player entering Super Bowl Sunday. Selfishly for me, a 6-1 ticket for Hurts being the first touchdown scorer of Super Bowl 59 on a deep pass down the right sideline to Jahan Dotson that initially was ruled a touchdown, but upon replay review, Dotson just a yard or so shy and cashing once again under a yard and a half for the shortest touchdown scored in a Super Bowl. A profitable night indeed for Jalen Hurts. And Donnie, the story through the opening 3 games of this playoff run for Hurts was a lack of production. Of course, he was ousted from the opening quarter of that Week 16 matchup against the Commanders in concussion protocol. We had not seen him since that juncture. Wasn't asked to do much against the Green Bay Packers, wasn't asked to do much in the snow against the LA Rams, and then injured that left knee in the second half. How healthy would he be in the NFC Championship game? Not overly mobile, despite 3 rushing scores, but 246 yards through the air, and did everything once again for the Eagles last night. And Donnie, one of my favorite things that you do, which I think is great for people who maybe don't stay up and watch all the games or are looking to recap early on the following morning, is looking at the box score and saying, if I were to tell you this, what would you think the result of the game would have been? We do that for Saquon Barkley. 25 carries, only 57 yards on the ground, the second fewest for Barkley in an Eagles uniform in his debut year in Philadelphia. 2.3 yards per carry. Did have 6 grabs for 40 receiving yards against Kansas City last night. But it wasn't the Saquon Barkley game that we all anticipated, DRS, and yet the Eagles were still pulling off perhaps the most dominant performance we have seen in a Super Bowl in nearly a decade.
It's crazy because also when you look at the running back position, remove again Jalen Hurts in the defense. Saquon Barkley, 26 for 57. Oh, maybe Gainwell had a pretty good lot of runs. 6 carries for 10 yards. Look at the wideouts. Like Devonta caught that 46-yard touchdown. Oh, he must have had 146 yards in that game since they scored 40 points. They finished with 69. A.J. Brown, 43. Dotson, 42. Barkley, 40. Goddard, 27. A balanced attack, but this box score doesn't line up with how dominant the Eagles were. Why? Because they kept having short fields. An interception for a touchdown, an interception inside the red zone. Both produced touchdowns there, but phenomenal plays by Jalen Hurts, which is the focal point. Once again, last Super Bowl, Ben, 70 yards on the ground. This Super Bowl record, 72 yards on the ground and a touchdown that you saw in that tush push. Every play Jalen Hurts needed to make, he made those plays. And even though throwing that one interception, which was terrible, never got flustered, never said, oh, no, here we go again. I'm turning the football over in the Super Bowl. Played lights out the rest of the way, which is exactly what you wanted the Eagles to do. When the play was there to be made, Jalen Hurts made that play.
And Donnie, that was the story of the game as well. Very early on in the second quarter, the Birds up by a touchdown. Jalen Hurts commits the first turnover of a Super Bowl. And you're thinking, all right, this is where Kansas City strikes. 3 and out, punted the football right back to the Eagles and had very little life from there on out. We'll talk about the defensive performance for the ages by the NFL's best defense all year long, perhaps under the best defensive mind the sport has seen in the last 2 decades in Vic Fangio, and put into context where this Eagles team ranks in NFL history. Next.
Slow play drum beat grows louder and louder every week, to the point now that they're making overt references to it on the broadcast.
So there's plenty of other guys that have to get faster. Tom definitely is more deliberate in his conversations, always has been since he's been on tour. I just think about Joe Scover and when those two started working together, how their conversations always seem to just keep on going and going.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
I can't take Boston at minus 110. I don't see the value in it, right? You're getting minus money. If Boston were to turn around and become even money or a plus 105 or plus 110, yeah, I can understand you want to take that. So because of the value at 5.5 to 1, I got to like the Knicks and their chances of coming out of the East.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
In a short format tournament like this, like the Olympics, now this is even smaller, only 4 teams. Who's got the best goaltending? Over, you're talking 3 round robin games and then a knockout with 4 teams. So you're playing 5 games.
I'm not sold yet, Mike, on the USA stuff, on the merch, but I think I'm sold on the USA at least being in the final.
Only on SportsGrid.
Patino himself, in a clip that we just played, said basically the stats are not backing up the team's wins.
St. John's offensive glass. That's where a lot of opportunities for St. John's came from. St. John's does not shoot the basketball well. It might even be fair to say they shoot it poorly. They were 3 of 16 from deep last night. But it doesn't seem to matter to them.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
A defensive performance for the ages last night by the NFL's best defensive unit all season long in the National Football League on the most monumental of stages in the most significant of matchups in a Super Bowl by the Eagles. Absolutely getting the better of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and that Chiefs offense. And not just bowing up, Donnie, when it mattered most, but having an answer to any potential question the Chiefs might ask and making Kansas City look like they were absolutely out at sea and lost the entirety of the football game. 3 total turnovers forced by Philadelphia, resulting directly in 17 points, including a pick 6 interception return touchdown by the rookie, celebrating his 22nd birthday, Cooper DeJean. And Zach Bond, who was largely a castaway and a specials teamer to open up his NFL career in New Orleans. His first year as a starter full-time in the NFL, he's an all-pro performer and has an interception late in the opening half against the Chiefs that resulted in a touchdown to A.J. Brown just a few seconds later. And at that point, Donnie, good night, New Orleans. The Eagles led 24-0 at the break, a single point shy of matching the largest halftime lead in Super Bowl history.
40-6 this game was, Ben, with a couple minutes left in the game. Let's understand how we got to that point, too, because if you're looking at the way things need to happen, you don't want to give the other team life. Hey, they got great starting field position at the 40-yard line or the 50-yard line. Every time the Eagles made a mistake, which was rare, Jalen Hurts interception, where did that ball end up? At the 2-yard line. You know what the defense did? 3-and-out the Kansas City Chiefs. Right before the half, oh, no, I really wanted the Eagles to get that 3rd and 3. They punt the ball inside the 10-yard line. What happens next, Ben? Interception. So you're putting the Chiefs in high-leverage situations where they must produce just to get out of their own end zone. And then what were they going to do? Drive 80-plus, 90-plus yards just to get a field goal? They weren't able to do that. So the Eagles' defense was dialing up the exact play calls that you needed. And also understand this. We've learned this in the past before. You watch the New York Giants rattle Tom Brady by rushing 4 rushers and saying, we have to drop back everybody and make plays. It's very rare that you see a non-blitzing situation where Patrick Mahomes just doesn't stand comfortably in the pocket and have the perfect play call here against a zone or man defense. That didn't happen. he was rushed the entire performance, something we don't usually see, a rattled Mahomes, which led to turnover after turnover after turnover. It's amazing how much when you snap the football as a quarterback and you're immediately thinking about the pass rush as opposed to saying, let me wait on this route for a couple guys to clear. There were some plays to be made by the Kansas City Chiefs. If you remember, Hopkins on a wide open crossing route earlier in that game when they were only down, let's just say, 2 scores, dropping that football, which forced a punt as opposed to a 30 or 40-yard gain. All the plays were made by the Philadelphia Eagles defense, just not enough plays until late for Kansas City. And it all stems from that front four that I talked about so many times in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. The Eagles had one of the best sack defense in the history of football by organic pass rush by 4. It was an ice skating rink. Mahomes did whatever he wanted because he wasn't touched here. Fast forward to this year. On turf, you let a nasty defensive line go up against an average offensive line, and you saw the results. That was supposed to happen 2 years ago. The Eagles made it right in Super Bowl 59.
The second most sacks ever in NFL history during the 2022 NFL season, only behind a fellow Super Bowl champion and the Monsters of the Midway and the 1985 Chicago Bears. Last night, they made it right in a big way. Monumental night for Josh Sweat, the kind of day you dream of a pass rusher in the NFL. 2.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss on the most significant of stages all season long. 6 sacks, 16 pressures, a 52% pressure rate with only a 4-man rush. That is historic numbers for any NFL game, Donnie, but certainly in a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes entering last night had not thrown an interception since Week 11 against the Buffalo Bills. He tosses 2, including a pick 6 and another INT right before the break that resulted in a touchdown. He also had a fumble in the second half. 3 turnovers for Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl. We'll talk more about Kansas City and where this leaves this dynastic run as we come back on the other side of the break. But I do want to put into context this year's Eagles team, and we'll do that with Donnie Rightside on the other side of the break. He'll have that second Lombardi trophy in the background in just a few days. What this means for Philadelphia, what this means for the Eagles as a franchise, what it says about this year's crew. And don't forget, started just 2-2. Plenty more on the early line. Up next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
In a short format tournament like this, like the Olympics, now this is even smaller, only 4 teams. Who's got the best goaltending? Over, you're talking 3 round robin games and then a knockout with 4 teams. So you're playing 5 games.
I'm not sold yet, Mike, on the USA stuff, on the merch. but I think I'm sold on the USA at least being in the final.
Only on SportsGrid.
In the 5th ever Super Bowl appearance for the Philadelphia Eagles as a franchise, the second Lombardi Trophy making its way back to the city of brotherly love. Grease up those light poles. You know it's going to be a party in Philadelphia. Donnie, when this season is done, you will look at the Eagles' resume and you might ask yourself, where does this team rank among the best we have ever seen do it in the National Football League? 18 wins. 18 after a 2-2 start in a bye week, and even emerging out of the bye week in week number 6 as more than a touchdown favorite at home against the Cleveland Browns, Philadelphia struggled. There was conversation. Is Nick Sirianni really the right guy in Philly? Does he have the temperament? Is he astute enough to be the successful head coach to elevate his team to a Super Bowl win? The Eagles win 16 of their last 17 games, and they won 15 in a row that Jalen Hurts started and finished. And they cap it off last night, Donnie, in New Orleans with perhaps the most dominant performance in a Super Bowl we have ever seen, at least in the last decade or so. A 13-1 price for the Birds to win a Super Bowl championship before the year got underway. 5th shortest around the National Football League. They cashed that ticket last night. Donnie, you will add that second Lombardi replica to your set in just a few days. You have been a lifelong Eagles fan. How will you remember this 2024 campaign for the Birds?
As Kelsey said, nobody likes us and we don't care at this point. And you want to talk about that kinship now between the coach and also the quarterback? Similarities here. And for a while, Ben, they didn't actually get along. There were rumbles in the streets the past 2 years. These guys don't even like to be in meetings together. How can they bridge that gap? But you know what they had under the same umbrella was, you know what? When I listen to sports talk radio, they can't stand me. Talking about Nick Sirianni. They want to be out of here. The national media, after they go into the bye week, after getting clapped by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Scott doesn't have it. Should they move on? Bill Belichick's waiting on call number 2 over here so we can get him in next year. This season is a disaster. And the same thing with Jalen Hurts. It was like nobody thought he wasn't going to be a good quarterback, but just not getting any credit and saying like, boy, if this team had any other quarterback, they would be a really good performer that you can trust. So these two players, coaches and player, sort of galvanized each other by saying like, look, we know we're good. Nobody likes us. We don't care. Let's still get the job done at this point. So from looking at the season in totality, it was a crazy roller coaster ride. But understand, Ben, this roller coaster wasn't ups and downs. This was slower start to the season after the bye, an absolute rocket ship to the moon, which saw them lose only one game because their MVP quarterback got knocked out in the first quarter and ended up losing a double-digit lead on the road to Washington, who was an NFC champion finalist in that season. It wasn't as if that this team was like, hey, I hope we can get it together. Maybe we'll be the hot football team once the playoffs start. They were tremendous and still have the doubters. How about game number 1 of the playoffs? Oh, my goodness. The one team you don't want to face, the best 7 seed in the history of the sport, the Packers, wipe them out. The Rams come to town, the hottest team in football. Oh, my goodness. Nobody wants to see them handle their business. Wow, Washington, maybe the best quarterback in football, even better than Patrick Mahomes, is Jaden Daniels. Wipe the floor at them. Oh, no, here come the Chiefs where nobody can win. They're headed for a three-peat, and they're going to make history. Wipe the floor with them, too. So from a fan perspective, for me, I caught myself riding that wave saying, this is unbelievable. Enjoy every minute you have. And the difference is as well, Ben, where you put this in perspective from 2017. We'll never get that feeling again. That was right down to the wire. It was Tom Brady. The Eagles have never won a world championship. It was unbelievable to see. And I tell everybody, maybe the best night of my life. But yesterday, watching that game with no stress in the second half, understanding that nobody can tell the Eagles, like, hey, everybody eventually gets one. That was a fluke. They got 2 Lombardis now and used to getting back to the Super Bowl. And I was telling my daughter last night, you don't understand this. When 1980s and 1990s, Ben, the Super Bowl wasn't for Eagles fans. It was to have fun with your friends and, hey, the game's going to be a blowout. And look at that, another Cowboys victory, another, Giants victory at this point, another Washington victory at this point. So now you take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles going like, we are used to this now. One of those gold standards that Jeffrey Lurie said 20 years ago where we never won a Super Bowl and people laughed. Yep. The Philadelphia Eagles today, the gold standard of the NFL.
There is no doubt about it. And, Donnie, the gold standard of the NFC was zero doubt or inclination by any means. Philadelphia has played in 3 Super Bowls in the last 8 years. They have won 2 Lombardi trophies in that span. Sure, the 49ers have made the NFC Championship game 4 of the last 6 seasons. Sure, the Detroit Lions are on the come-up, continuing to attempt to make history. But when you look at the pecking order in the NFC, it is Philadelphia and then everybody else. And I do just want to take a moment because, Donnie, I picked the Eagles to win a Super Bowl this year. And one of the main reasons wasn't Saquon Barkley or a great draft by Howie Roseman. Once again, it was the elevation in coordinators. Kellen Moore offensively, but mainly Vic Fangio on the defensive side. A guy that entered the NFL in 1986. Where? In New Orleans, as the linebackers coach for nearly a decade of the Dome Patrol of the Saints in 1986. Nearly 4 decades later, will wear his first Super Bowl ring. If Vic Fangio were to ever emote any kind of sentiment, Donnie, it would probably be that of gratitude to be a Super Bowl champion and finally get to the mountaintop last night. What a performance by Philadelphia. A defensive display of the ages in a Super Bowl in NFL history. And when you look around that Eagles locker room, of course, it always starts with the quarterback position. That is Jalen Hurts, who did not enter Super Bowl 59 as the favorite even on his own team to win the MVP award, but for the second time in 3 years was the best individual player on a football field in the biggest football game of a season. If we were ever going to hear anything out of Jalen Hurts, this would be the time.
Was able to execute. And I think the main thing I'll point to is you being able to find ways to win in multiple ways. We've been able to be dominant on the ground. We've been able to be efficient in the pass game and do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. And I think over the course of our year, you guys have heard me say it, just because we don't doesn't mean we can't. And when you hear a statement like that, I think it always comes down to, well, what is you're missing? Why are you doing this? I'm doing it to win. I do it to win. This team approaches it just to do the same thing, and that's what it's about. I'm not going to look back at anything and remember anything that someone said about me or an opinion that was had. I'm going to think about the championships that we won.
Donnie, we asked the question in the build-up to Super Bowl Sunday. Could the Eagles win if Saquon Barkley was stifled? The answer, a resounding yes, because of the performance of Jalen Hurts. Nearly 300 total yards of offense from the quarterback alone. 3 total touchdowns, and for a second consecutive Super Bowl for Philadelphia was the Eagles' leading rusher with 72 yards on the ground. Again, outdueling Patrick Mahomes, and finally, we'll go with a Lombardi trophy back to Philly.
It's tremendous, too. And also, Ben, I love nostalgia, like just the nostalgia of the Superdome. The first Super Bowl played there was with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Raiders at the time, Oakland Raiders at the time. Yeah. They settled up there and they lost that game. But can you imagine all the great moments in that building that he's included with? Because we talk about the Rose Bowl, which may be the best venue in football in the history of the sport. But when you're talking about just big game cities, it's New Orleans. Like Michael Jordan made a big shot there. Keith Smart made a big shot there. William Refrigerator Perry scored a touchdown there. So many big boxing matches. Super Bowls went down. Brady got his first there. The Vinatieri kick. Like so many big things that now Jalen Hurts can say, I won a Super Bowl. I'm an MVP. And I did it in one of the biggest dome places you can do it with the history of the sport. You need to rewrite, because you know what? There's going to be more highlights in New Orleans, but he's part of that. And just to see him on that podium, still not seeming like he's excited, saying, I'm still taking this all in. Maybe today he's a little bit more excited because you know what? Damn it, I did that.
Puffing a victory cigar, I think appreciating the moment, even if he's not sharing that in full earnest. We'll hear from Nick Sirianni up next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
In a short format tournament like this, like the Olympics, now this is even smaller, only 4 teams. Who's got the best goaltending? Over, you're talking 3 round robin games and then a knockout with 4 teams. So you're playing 5 games.
I'm not sold yet, Mike, on the USA stuff, on the merch, but I think I'm sold on the USA at least being in the final.
Only on SportsGrid.
A second Super Bowl appearance in 3 years, but after a disastrous skid to end out 2023, dropping 5 of their final 6, including on the road in the postseason in the opening round against the Buccaneers, and starting this 2024 campaign just 2-2, Nick Sirianni was hearing it from everybody in Philadelphia. Media, maybe even players, and certainly fans, even in his own home stadium. But Nick Sirianni now gets the final word as a Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, he just keeps getting better. He knows how to win. He does a great job of being able to block out all the outside noise. I think it's, I find it funny when it's like, well, Jalen is good because he's got a good team around him. Like, that's football. Like, again, you cannot be great without the greatness of others. Like, Jalen can't do it by himself. He needs AJ. He needs that offensive line. He needs Saquon, and vice versa. The reason Saquon has a special year, not only the offensive line, but the attention that Jalen commands for the run game. He's special. Jalen's special, and the criticism, it just blows my mind because I think he's so special and won so many games and works his butt off and. Just continues to get better, can block out everything and just focus on the task at hand of getting better, putting yourself positioned to win each week. And he does a great job of that. And he had an unbelievable game today when we needed him to, because when you sell out to stop, we knew how good of a coach and how good of a defense that we were playing today. But when you sell out to stop one thing, another thing opens. And Jalen was able to take advantage of that today, and man, him and this team are world champs forever.
And the Chiefs did contain Saquon Barkley, 25 carries, only 57 yards on the ground, just 2.3 yards per pop. But for a second consecutive Super Bowl for the Eagles, their quarterback is the leading rusher, and this time with a Lombardi Trophy. Donnie, you heard Nick Sirianni address the criticism and the questions, perhaps, that Jalen Hurts had at the upper echelon of being a quarterback that could guide his team to a Super Bowl championship. I think some of those criticisms were also pointed at Nick Sirianni. Could he be the managerial and CEO head coach to lead his team to a championship? The answer to both of those questions, again, a resounding yes last night.
Absolutely. But by the way, let's take you back to Monday night down in New Orleans at the Superdome where the media scrum was out here. You know, Saquon Barkley had out of 30 rows of people in front of him. So when you made your way around the field, you say, okay, there's Jalen Hurts over here. There's Devontae Smith. There's A.J. Brown. The opposite, if you had Nick Sirianni, said, wow, look at this, man. You got maybe 10 reporters in front of him asking questions. You could probably get right in there and say, you know what? Hey, Nick, how do you feel about the Super Bowl? The problem is he answers questions for like a 30-minute soliloquy of how he started high school and his grade school and his high school here, which made me laugh because, like, I think I can get, but same thing you just heard there. There's a lot of talking but not saying a lot, which is the only criticism I have of Sirianni at this point because he does sort of meander on. But it's just a little anecdote from Monday, like, hey, ask him a quick question. There is no such thing as a quick question with Sirianni. But what he was saying was correct. And that's why I talked about that kinship between him and Jalen Hurts. The outside noise, which is an avalanche towards both of them. And can you imagine, even with this season, Sirianni loses. Like, that's 2 losses in a row to the Kansas City Chiefs winning 3 in a row, back to back to back, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. It's no slight, but my goodness, that, the focus of the press on Hurts and Sirianni would have been incredible. So it's nice to see them feeling vindicated after this game. Like, can I breathe a little bit now? I think I'm a pretty good damn coach. And over the first 5 years of my career, there's been not a better start in NFL history. And I have a Super Bowl, which I just beat Andy Reid in. The same with Jalen Hurts. So I agree, Ben, with a lot of what he was saying last night. Sort of the, I told you so, and I can't believe you're doubting this guy. And yes, he is special. And maybe now you'll see that Jalen Hurts is special.
There is always that relationship, right, between the 2 most important positions within your NFL organization, head coach and quarterback. And when both are doubted at the top level of the sport, to win a Super Bowl, to have that as a part of your resume and legacy forever, that's kind of the final statement you ever need to make. Something that Patrick Mahomes understands very well. But, Donnie, in the joy of victory, there is the other side, the agony of defeat. The three-peat hope for KC comes up short. The hope for history was not able to be attained last night in New Orleans. And for Patrick Mahomes, it was a pedestrian, dare I say, poor performance that we have not often seen in these kind of games, in these kind of spots. 21 of 32 for 257 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 of those thrown in the final 3 minutes of regulation when the game was truly out of hand. Really, all 3 touchdowns thrown in the final 16 minutes of regulation when the game was already out of hand, and 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and a fumble on a strip sack as well that resulted in 17 points. Donnie, we have often said, and deservedly so, in this historic dynastic run for Kansas City, if Patrick Mahomes is there, they are always going to have the pedigree. They are always going to have the benefit of the doubt. Last night, it was quite the opposite. What did you make of Mahomes' performance against the Eagles?
It was incredible in the opposite direction that you would feel for Patrick Mahomes because you saw some of the highlight plays. Their first touchdown of the game, Mahomes rolls out. There was a laser beam on a comeback route there to Xavier Worthy. That was great. How about late in the game? Even though it was backups, you know what? Let me sit in the pocket and throw an absolute dart down the field for a 50-plus yard touchdown pass. Those were great. How about the back shoulder fade to DeAndre Hopkins? But the problem is you made too many mistakes early on. And Patrick Mahomes said it best also after the game when he was talking about, you know what? I didn't play my best. I can't turn the football over. And some turnovers are worse than others, Ben. A pick six is the worst thing you can have. But you know what the second worst thing is? Throw a pick inside your own red zone that deliberately goes right for a touchdown 1 or 2 plays later. You can't do that against good football teams, and he understood that and told that tale at the podium. But also, this wasn't like Will Levis throwing this like, hey, he's going to do that. This was Patrick Mahomes on the biggest stage where he usually dominates, looking like he was a rookie out there making rookie mistakes. That's unheard of. They'll regroup. That's a great football team. It's still Andy Reid. He said he's coming back next year. And as long as you have Patrick Mahomes, you're always going to have a chance. But that shows you how dominant that defense was to make maybe the most talented quarterback in the history of the NFL look pedestrian.
We'll talk about the legacy of this team, and we'll hear from both Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes up next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
In a short format tournament like this, like the Olympics, now this is even smaller, only 4 teams. Who's got the best goaltending? Over, you're talking 3 round robin games and then a knockout with 4 teams. So you're playing 5 games.
I'm not sold yet, Mike, on the USA stuff, on the merch, but I think I'm sold on the USA at least being in the final.
Only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the Early Line, we continue our reactions in this opening hour to everything we saw in Super Bowl 59. The praise for Philadelphia in the agony of a defeat for Kansas City. The hope for a three-peat to become the first Super Bowl champion ever to win 3 consecutive Lombardi trophies comes up well short last night in New Orleans. We talked about Patrick Mahomes. Of course, there is also his top target in their illustrious postseason career together in Travis Kelce. Donnie, when the game script was so out of hand, of course, you're not going to put up the stats that everybody anticipated. But Travis Kelce did not last night. Only 4 grabs for 39 yards, well under his final receiving yards prop of 59 and a hook. He had gone over that number in the last 3 Super Bowls. Kansas City had played with at least 83 yards in all 3. Did not hit pay dirt, and of course did not get down on a knee as the confetti was falling inside the Superdome. We'll give you our reactions to what we think this means for the dynasty run in Kansas City. But before we do that, let's hear from the big man himself, Big Red, Andy Reid, on what this loss means for the Chiefs at this moment.
Listen, man, a compliment to our fans and all the support that they've given us. Today was a rough day. We didn't really play well in any of the phases. Didn't coach good enough. They did a nice job. I'm proud of our guys, though, for the battle, the fight that they put in throughout the year and all the games that they've played here over the last few years. So my hat goes off to the guys for that. And we'll learn from this. Like most games here, when you don't do very well, you learn from it as a coach, you learn from it as a player, and you move on.
Donnie, I take Andy Reid at his word. Yes, it is the end to this historic run of the dynasty component for Kansas City. The three-peat goes out of the window, although they did make history as the first ever back-to-back Super Bowl champion to even appear in a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes is only 29, and yes, there are going to be changes, but Andy Reid is going to be back as well. This era has come to an end, perhaps in Kansas City, but the Chiefs are going to have a lot to say about who wins the AFC in Super Bowls for many more years to come.
Absolutely, they will. Look at their season. The record Ben says 15-2. That's not really the case. Last game of the season, they benched all their starters and took a loss. So this is a team that lost one football game up to the Super Bowl. And yes, there were bad breaks and bounces that went against them, but that's what they do. You provide your own luck when you're a quality football team, just like the Kansas City Chiefs. And Andy understands this. You can't win every big game. It's not a best of 7. You either bring your A game, and if you don't bring it, you're subject to get beat, and that's what happened in the Super Bowl. Did we anticipate it being down 40-6 late in that football game? I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card, but understand what he's saying. This is a week-to-week league here. If you don't bring your A game, sometimes you get beat, but also the future is bright, as you said. You still have the most talented quarterback in the NFL probably for another decade. And Andy Reid isn't getting younger, but you know what keeps you young? Having a really good football team and an organization that has 100% support. The one thing that Andy knows next year, he doesn't have to go to Brett Veach's GM and say, please get me a pass catcher. Please get me another defensive end. Yeah. They will make that happen before him because when you're in that window of greatness, you tend to push those chips in. And understand this. I can't believe Kansas City won the Super Bowl last year, let alone even making it back to the Super Bowl this year. They're not the most talented team. They have the best coach and quarterback. Yes, they do, but they made their own luck and breaks by winning all of those close games. Eventually, that's going to run out. So no shame in their game for Kansas City. And next year, Ben, when we start talking about the season and what that's going to entail, is anybody going to be like, the one team I'm not taking is the Kansas City Chiefs to get back to the Super Bowl? No, they're going to be right up there again.
Yes, they certainly are, because 7 seasons with Patrick Mahomes as the starting quarterback of the Chiefs, they have at least played in the AFC Championship game in all 7, appearing in a Super Bowl 5 times, already with 3 Lombardi trophies. But now let's hear from Patrick Mahomes on where he feels last night went wrong.
You know, I didn't have to say much. I thought other leaders, Chris Jones especially, spoke, and like we talked about, I mean, it hurts. I mean, it's going to hurt for a while, but how can you respond from it? We have a great football team. We still have a young football team, and a lot of these guys will be their first time having a defeat in a season. And how can you get better? How can you not be satisfied with just getting here and taking your game to the next level? And that starts with me and the other leaders on this team, but it'll feed throughout the entire team, and hopefully we can come back next season and put up a better effort.
And we expect Kansas City to do just that. It's the end of Hour 1, but we continue the Super Bowl reactions in Hour 2 next.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
You want me to solve all this tush-push and fourth down malarkey that goes on with the officials? Here's a crazy idea. Get rid of the worst rule in the NFL, and that is forward progress. How about this? Where I knock your ass in the ground is where the ball goes, period. Let's end this whole conversation. Like, if I drop you back 4 yards, then you lost 4 yards. If we get rid of forward progress, this tush-push and everything else is taken care of. Where I put your tail on the ground is where the ball goes, end of conversation. It's the dumbest rule and the most arbitrary rule. The only thing that is a worse call in the NFL than forward progress is the punt that goes out of bounds when you watch the official walk down the sideline having absolutely no clue where that ball crossed over. All I can think of is that Price is Right game go do-de-do-de-do, do-de-do-de-do, as he's walking down the sideline, arbitrarily trying to figure out where the ball crossed over because he's got no clue.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions